In this video, we are going to talk about how to set up hypothesis testing for one sample means. Step 1. Checking assumptions. The variable must be quantitative. The data are obtained using randomization. If randomization is not used, then the results of hypothesis testing may not be trustworthy. The population distribution is approximately normal. So when the sample size is large, this assumption is not as critical as when the sample size is small. Because the central limited theory tells us when the sample size is large enough, the sampling distribution usually will be approximately normal distributed. Step 2. State the hypothesis. Step 2. State the hypothesis. The non-hypothesis will be the population mean mu equals to some number. Remember that this book will always use equal in the non-hypothesis. Mu0 will be equal to some number. There are 3 ways to set up alternative hypothesis. If it is the two-tailed test, then mu doesn't equal mu0. If it is one-tailed test and the left-tailed test, the mu is less than mu0. And for the right-tailed test, mu larger than mu0. We include the statement we are trying to study. Sometimes it is easier to start with the alternative. Step 3. Calculate the test statistic. The distance between the sample mean and the non-hypothesis value mu0 is measured by the number of standard errors between them. We must use the t-test statistics since we do not know sigma, the population standard deviation, and we have to use the sample standard deviation S to estimate it. By using the t-distribution instead of the normal distribution, we are accounting for more error. The t-statistic is calculated in this way. Notice that the setup for the equation is the same whether you are looking for a z-test statistic or a t-test statistic. It is calculated as the estimate of the parameter minus value of the parameter value under the non-hypothesis divided by standard error of estimate. Step 4. Find p-value. We will use StatCrunch to get the p-values. When you have a dataset and you want to find the p-value, here is the StatCrunch command you can follow. And when you have summary statistics and you want to find the p-value, here is the StatCrunch statistic you can follow. On the homework, you will need to use StatCrunch to give you the p-value. But make sure you can calculate the test statistics by hand for your exam. On the exam, you will be given StatCrunch output with the p-value. And also in your lab section, you will have opportunities to practice both commands. Step 5. Make conclusion. Making conclusion consists of state your decision and interpret the results. Recall the level of significance. Conclusions based on the p-values are made by looking at the level of significance. And the significance level is a number such that we reject the non-hypothesis if the p-value is less than or equal to that number. And the most common level of confidence is 0.05. Other common ones are 0.1 and 0.01. The level of significance is denoted by alpha. If p-value is less than or equals to alpha, the level of significance, we reject non-hypothesis. And we say with p-value equals something, we have sufficient evidence that we should reject the null hypothesis in the favor of alternative hypothesis. If the p-value is larger than the level of significance, then we cannot reject null hypothesis. We can write down this sentence with p-value equals to some number, and we do not have sufficient evidence to reject null hypothesis. Last, do not reject the null hypothesis is not the same thing as accept the null hypothesis.